everyone, Cameron with CBM Reviews here, and we're on the road to Infinity War again. This time we're talking about Thor the Dark World. Thor the Dark World was directed by Alan Taylor, and it stars Chris Hemsworth as Thor, it stars Tom Hiddleston as Loki, Natalie Portman as Jane Foster, Christopher Eccleston as Malekith, Rene Russo as Frigga. So since we're talking about Thor the Dark World, I want to give you guys a multiple choice question. Who was the bad guy in this movie? Was it number 1, Loki, 2, Malekith, or 3, a completely forgettable story? There really isn't a whole lot to take from it as far as the story's concerned. Is this movie completely skippable? No. There are actually things that happen in this movie that affect the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. Some of which concerns the Infinity Stones, and some of which concerns the actual Thor franchise. Before we continue, I just want everybody to remember, we're still doing the giveaway where one lucky person, as long as we get to 200 subscribers, will win the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe on Blu-ray. Let's talk about what is relevant in Thor the Dark World. So I want to start with the story, and I'm just going to hit this story real quick. So after the events of the Avengers, Loki is in the dungeon in Asgard. And by the way, let me just say that Asgard looks a whole lot better than it did in Thor. Not to say that Asgard looked poor in the first Thor, but it just looks a whole lot better and more fleshed out in this iteration. So Loki's in the dungeon, and Thor is out trying to make sure that the 9 realms are back in order ever since the Bifrost was destroyed in the first Thor. Order is restored, and Jane Foster is checking out this phenomenon that's happening called the convergence, where all the 9 realms kind of like stack on top of each other like a super Big Mac or a giant Oreo cookie. She gets kind of trapped in between one of the 2 dimensions and finds the ether, which we find out later on is one of the Infinity Stones. Now, whenever you're watching this, if you're paying attention, they say power a lot. They consider, you know, so much power, and it's red. And in the comics, the Power Stone has always been red. And yet, it's not the Power Stone. And I couldn't figure out, why not make it power? If Odin says power like 13 times when talking about the ether, and still it's not that's not important. I'm going to continue with the story. Jane finds the ether, it gets sucked up into her body, and she is dying because it is just leeching off of her. Malekith, who is the leader of the Dark Elves, realizes the ether's been found and the convergence is coming, and I'm going to go and get it and destroy everything because I want things to be back to the way they were in the Dark Ages, so to speak. They go to Asgard, they kill Odin's wife Frigga. Loki's upset, his mother's been killed. And Thor devises a plan to go try to destroy the ether after it's being sucked out of it. It's a long, convoluted thing. It doesn't work. Thor is fighting Malekith, and there's this whole thing, and they win, and that's pretty much it. It's pretty boring. There really aren't too many fights. There's like one scene that I liked, but it was right before the fight, and it doesn't really happen during the fight. So there's that. Like I said, there's not really much story-wise that I want to take out. But as far as how it affects the Thor narrative as a whole, Loki was in prison, and at the end, Loki kind of tricks everybody. Everybody thinks Loki's dead. He has actually taken Odin's place. And so now Loki sits on the throne. I almost wish they would have done more with this. In the cinematic universe as a whole, it only affects the Thor franchise, but that's okay. I can live with that. But however, in a mid-credit scene, you see Lady Sif and Volstagg the Voluminous taking the ether to a character called the Collector. Taneleus Taval is what they called him, the Collector. And they give it to him, and he says, why not keep this in your own vault? And then Volstagg lays the bomb. He says, the Tesseract is already on Asgard. It's not wise to keep 2 Infinity Stones so close to one another. Boom, we finally got the thing that we've been waiting for forever. They mentioned the Infinity Stones. And later we find out that this is the Reality Stone. So now we have the mention of the Infinity Stones, and everybody went wild, myself included, as to where are the other ones. Now we know the Tesseract is an Infinity Stone, the Ether is an Infinity Stone, but there are 4 more to track down, even though we've already seen 1 already. That was kind of like the biggest impact that Thor the Dark World had on it. Was it a good movie? It was a meh movie. A lot like Iron Man 3. There's a lot to forget, including the bad guy, the villain. Normally we talk about forgettable villains. This was a bad villain. It was not a good villain. I disliked it. The motivations for the villain, I think, sucked. The look of the villain, I think, sucked. The memorability sucked. The fight scene sucked. This bad guy fails. He's not going to be the last bad guy, in my opinion, that fails. But in my opinion, Malekith, there's also a huge love interest deal with Thor and Jane Foster. I felt it was slightly forced in the first Thor. I feel like it's hugely forced in this one. I'm not a fan of their little thing they got going on. I just wasn't feeling it. And then Kat Dennings, when this one, her comedy felt organic in the first Thor, and once again this one feels forced. The whole Selvig thing with, you know, him being naked and then having no pants, I didn't understand why that was the way that it was. There were just so many things that just didn't flow naturally. And if I have to be honest, if you do want to watch this one, besides for the mentions with, you know, the Thor franchise and the Infinity Stones, watch this for Loki. Loki steals the show. He does. Like Anthony Hopkins even feels flat in this, but not Tom Hiddleston. Loki in every scene, even when he's confined by himself in the dungeon in Asgard, he is a multi-dimensional character, and there's a reason why everybody considers Loki to be the best Marvel Cinematic Universe villain. It's because he is. So, those are my thoughts on Thor the Dark World. Tell me what you guys thought. Did you enjoy it? Were you just kind of like on the fence, or did you really despise it? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you're new here, subscribe, because you want to get in on that giveaway, I know. And share this with all your friends. As always, this is Cameron with CBM Reviews. We'll see you next time.